Hey, hi, folks. Hope you are doing good and keeping safe. So, I'm back with another amazing podcast. On today's episode, I have Goel, who is a serial podcaster and a marketing enthusiast. Hey, Nishant, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hey Atishay, it's great to be back. I'm doing great, thank you. Hope you are doing well as too.
Doing amazing, man. I'm so excited about this podcast. We have been, rescheduling this for a long. We were supposed to read a month back, but dates don't match. And today, finally, we are connecting, and I'm so excited to talk to you about so many things.
Same here, man. I love your persistence on it. You persisted, you didn't give up, and that's something really
I didn't
commendable.
on you. नहीं बात करनी है तो करनी है लाना ही है शो पे amazing bro. All right, so
That's
Nishant.
something everyone should learn, man. That's something everyone should learn.
Thank you so much, bro. Yes. So let's start with the discussion. So, Nishant, first of all, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
So, this is a very this is the kind of question that makes me think, okay, what should I say I've done, or should I say who I am? Well, I'm Nishant Goel, who loves talking to people. That's why I started podcasting. Um, and I would not say that I chose podcasting. It's more that podcasting chose me.
Hmm.
I wanted to talk to people and get their insights into how they are doing things and what are their experiences. Now, people would not give you time just to have a chit chat. So
Hmm.
I learned this. Okay, if you build a podcast, you can ask people to come on the podcast, and that way you can get their time. Cool. I started with that. Then one of my guests mentioned, "Hey, Nishant, you're good at this. Would you like to do it for me?" I'm like, "Okay, interesting proposal." And then I was like, "What will I get?" So in my mind, I was like, "Hey, if I'm getting to do this for him, I'll have direct access to this person all the time. That's
Hmm.
enough for me. I'll get to learn from him, shadow him, and, maybe absorb his 20 years of experience in less than a year. So that's more than enough of value for me. But still, I asked. And the number he quoted, man, that's more than what an average engineer makes in a full-time job after their
Hmm.
degree, and I was still a student. So yeah, that's how podcasting chose me. It's like, hey, get into podcasting. You belong here.
That is so amazing and fascinating. And the most fascinating thing, I see on your LinkedIn is you have written 4 times podcast host, and your last podcast got acquired. I was like, yeah, a podcast is Amalra Mesa, and this guy has done 4 podcasts and even sold one. So tell us about it. Kaise hua? How does it happen and the journey through it?
So okay, so it's actually the very first podcast which got me the lead for podcast
Hmm.
services. Another guest was like, hey, you are in a very good market,
Hmm.
relationships. So my
Hmm.
first podcast is called All Things Relationship, and they're
Hmm.
like, you have a good audience. What happened is, for a specific guest,
Hmm.
the guest got 2 emails from audience members sharing their feedback, that how much they loved that person.
Hmm.
So this is very rare, especially when you are just 10, 12 episodes in. And people got to know. Uh, and this time, this guest was like, hey, can I buy you out? Buy the podcast out. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? It's very new for me. I'm like, okay, let's
Even
explore.
I'm
What do
like,
you
what does it
mean?
mean? So when you say podcast got acquired, so are you working that for that person now, or the idea or the concept got acquired?
So yes, I had the same question. So we worked it out. It was like, yeah, it can mean a number of things, honestly. So
Hmm.
discussed it, and what we settled on is now the rights to podcast and its content is transferred,
Hmm.
and I will, on a retainer, help them build it further
Hmm.
as per their requirements. So the same podcast that was initially taking my time and money is now earning me money. And I'm doing the same thing I was doing anyways.
And that was way back when you were in your MBA, right?
Yes, and it
Wow.
was my very first podcast.
Wow, amazing. So you are in college, you started a podcast as a side hustle that got acquired and that is giving you money. Wow, amazing. You know, when we are in college, हमें ये नहीं पता होता था कि what kind of jobs will be, what kind of companies will be coming and what kind of jobs we will be doing after college. And here is you, you know, in your MBA, starting a podcast, selling it, and then starting three another. Wow, man.
It's so that's the thing is always was a curious and am a
Hmm.
very curious person about everything around me. So that's where the curiosity picked up. I was having conversations with people and I continued having conversations and I thought let's share the same conversations with the world.
Hmm.
That was for me podcast. It was not something I was working on. It was I never took it as a hustle thing. It was just something I loved.
So the first one got acquired. Is it still in running? Is it still live?
We are launching its next season by end of
Oh,
month,
amazing.
end
Amazing.
of March 23.
And how many episodes were in season one?
Uh, I don't remember. It's been 2 years. Maybe about a dozen episodes in season one,
Oh,
about 10 episodes in season two.
amazing. Amazing. So
So,
that was all about your first podcast, All Think Relationship. Talk about the rest three. So what were the podcast all about? What kind of guests you bring on the podcast and what is happening with them right now?
so my second podcast, Marketing Chakraview, I
Hmm.
invited marketing directors, CMOs, and
Hmm.
all marketing people from all verticals of marketing,
Hmm.
having conversations with them about their experience with people, clients, teams,
Hmm.
and even the technologies, everything. So that
Hmm.
was Marketing Chak Review.
And it's still in
And
running?
it's available, but I have not published fresh episodes
Hmm.
in quite a while.
Hmm.
Another one which was an experiment, it's live, but I'm not doing it. My co-host might still continue do a few episodes here or there, but it's not a very active project. It's let's explore it.
And
So
what was the theme of it?
uh, the theme of it was understanding different perspectives around
Hmm.
sex.
Hmm. Got it.
People from around the world think differently, experience differently, and have very unusual experiences as well. I once interviewed a lady who was in a sex cult,
Hmm.
and those details are wow, you cannot imagine. I could not imagine, at least, when you go in the mentality of it,
Hmm.
how the cult behavior influenced her mentality. At age of 13, she was desperate that feeling left behind because she never had sex at age of 13.
Hmm. That's so deep, man. That's really deep.
It's when you go behind the psychology of it, when you go behind understanding the environment she must have been in and the people around her and
Hmm.
everything, a lot more details that she shared.
Wow. So deep
Yeah,
and dark.
yeah, it was a moment where I realized maybe
Hmm.
maybe that's one vertical I'm not yet ready to explore in more depth.
Hmm.
It's too disturbing for me.
Hmm. That was your third one. And what about the fourth one?
Fourth one, SAS Backstage. So it's
Yes.
with co-host Vishal Rewari. He's an angel investor and a SaaS builder and
Hmm.
has worked with some really big organizations.
Can you break down the term SaaS for the audience who are not familiar with it, from not from the IT background? If you can just break it down, what exactly is SaaS and what exactly you're doing in that?
Sure. So SaaS is software as a service. Now, simple example of SaaS is Gmail, which is
Hmm.
email software as a service,
Hmm.
Canva, which is design software as a service,
Hmm.
or online Google Sheets that you use are a
Hmm.
SaaS, Word, Microsoft Online is a SaaS, and so on.
So
So
basically,
every
everything which is online and you're working upon, you're inputting something. It's SaaS, right? Software as a service.
Yes,
Hmm.
earlier you installed a software for it. Now you doing the same thing through a browser. So it's a
Yes,
software that you're using over a browser,
on a
and
browser.
instead of buying it one time, you are you are paying for it as a subscription service.
Hmm.
So that's a
Wow.
SaaS software online as a subscription instead of one-time payment.
Hmm. So, what inspired or on your last podcast, which is still in running and getting a tremendous response? I'm a frequent listener and a viewer of the podcast. I really like all the episodes which you guys publish. So,
Thank
what intrigues you the most about starting that podcast, or maybe what was the trigger point that hey, let's go into this segment? Because this is a segment which I don't think it's not talked about a lot. There are a lot of marketing podcasts. There are a lot of podcasts about relationship, but this is a very unique concept. So first of all, what what was the trigger point for you to pick this particular theme for the podcast, and how it evolves, how that particular podcast evolves, and how you decide on which guest I need to bring on the podcast?
you. So this is a very this kind of a question. My answer would differ from a lot
Hmm.
of people out there.
Hmm.
When I decide to do a podcast, it's almost never what I plan out to do that comes out.
Hmm.
The reason being, I think of an idea, I vet it through the market, do my research, then vet it, then pivot,
Hmm.
then vet it, then pivot, then vet it, then pivot. You know, I
Hmm.
and Vishal, we started off with the idea of doing a podcast on operational strategy and optimization.
Hmm.
So from there to SaaS Backstage, a vertical where started interviewing people who built SaaS companies from ground up behind the closed curtains.
Hmm.
These are the people you do not see out there.
Right.
Founder is or co-founder is face of the company. Steve Jobs was face of the Apple, but
Yes.
the real work was being done by Steve Wozniak.
Yes.
So we would interview Steve Wozniak, not Steve Jobs. And that's what we are doing at SaaS Backstage.
So true. So you're absolutely spot on here, because every company has a business person and a technical person. All the famous companies have it. In case of Apple, so Steve Jobs was the person who was the people's person, right? He knows how to connect with people, how to sell something out, how to sell out an idea. And Steve Wozniak was the guy who was the person behind inventing and developing that technology. So I believe for any successful startup, you need a technical person who knows in and out of that particular or that particular area, and you need a people's person who can sell out that idea. It's very very rare, you have both the personalities in a single person who's very good technically and who's also very good, with people.
Thank you. I agree that you need both verticals, someone who can build and someone who can sell.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's more important to have the person who can sell than to have
Yes.
the person who can build. Because if the person
Hmm.
can sell, you can sell anything. And that's the truth of
Hmm.
life, that it's something
Right.
that took me a really long time to accept.
Hmm.
That being able to sell better is more important than being able to build better.
Hmm.
And there is another part. It's a branding thing that you should only have one face of the company.
Hmm. True.
Because if you have multiple faces of the company, people get confused.
True.
So have one face of the company. Even if there are two founders, they both are doing the same job. Only one person should be the face of company. And why founder? Because that person would not leave the company. As
Hmm.
happened with Cred actually. The
Right.
face of their company, they fired him.
Hmm.
Now the person went to the competitor and impacted Cred's brand value considerably.
So Kunal Shah is not the founder of Cred?
Nalsha is founder of Cred, but he was not the face of Cred in Cred's ads. A guy,
Oh,
that thin guy, if you remember,
yes, right. Because
yeah, so he
because
was fired
Cred
from
has.
Cred.
Mm. Oh, I see. Because cred, and that's a separate tangent we can go all together in, because cred has totally revolutionized the way the marketing works, right? They have put people in very different
It is a
situations.
very
The
good
Rahul
question.
Dravid app, the Rahul Dravid ad, the ad with Ravi Shastri. So they have totally changed the game, right? By, making audience see something which they haven't seen in the past, right? We haven't seen Rahul Dravid in a angry situation, right? That ad really broke the internet. So that they are very clever with their marketing, techniques.
The advertisements are really mesmerizing to say the least.
Mhm.
However, as a startup, it's a loss-making startup
It's
still.
a loss-making start. Even Kunal Shah said it in one of the interviews. I was listening to him. They're still burning a lot of cash, and there's a long way they need to go in order to be profitable.
Yeah. So I don't know how long. So
Hmm.
that's something
And
that's
I
a
guess
long
that's a
bet,
story.
and
That's a story with most of the
I
start.
do not adhere to that.
Hmm. And that's the story with
I
most
do
of the
not adhere.
startups currently. All the
Yeah,
startups,
yeah.
even the startups which are now have their, glorified IPOs, be it Paytm, be it Zomato, they're still loss-making companies. I don't know how they plan to go to IPO, because when you go into IPO, you are raising money to expand, right? You're not raising money to fuel your, already uh, burning cash burning startup. So that's a totally, messed up game the companies are playing now, and they have started realizing it. And that is the reason why a lot of companies who are supposed to, have their IPOs are still, backing off, be it Mama or be it Oyo. They know the investors are now smart. The retail investors like us are now smart. They can quickly sense that this company won't last, in a long won't last long if they're still burning cash. Because that is what we see, right? Paytm shares fell drastically after a couple of days when they, when they went live with the IPO, because everyone gets to know that they're still burning a lot of cash, and they don't have a very concrete part to revenue to generate revenue in the future. And it's a company which can go down anytime. And that is what is happening, right? uh, with the financial uncertainties in US and Europe, companies startups are facing funding crunch. And that is the reason a lot of companies are now downsizing. A lot of startups are downsizing because they don't have funds, they don't have a concrete revenue plan. They were just getting funding from investors by, projecting their, kind of revenue, by projecting their not revenues, they were projecting the sales and the growth. So that was the metric, right? Earlier funding used to happen on how much profit you have earned in a fiscal year or in a quarter. But for last few years or maybe a decade, the funding was happening on the basis of how many more customers you have acquired. So that was a metric. And for every quiet customer, if I give an example of Swiggy and Zomato, they were losing 20-30% of the amount. So let's say a person orders for 200 rupees, but they were burning 250 rupees to acquire the same person. To are still in deficit, right? They're in deficit of 50 rupees. They're burning that much money to acquire a new customer. And that puts a very deep hole in their pockets.
Yep. Especially when your numbers customers are there are a million customers, then
Mm,
you are in a loss of 50 million, which is not acceptable, honestly,
mm,
to a lot of investors. Now, of course, some investors accept that and push for that
mm,
because they believe in the vision or they think of
mm,
it as a bet. A
mm.
lot of VCs that they go are about is they bet on 100 and
Hmm.
they only need 5 to take off.
Right. True. So true. So true. Now, coming back to the topic, we can go in different tangents. I know you're a gold mine of knowledge and information. So when you're a podcaster yourself, you absorb so much of information and knowledge, right? And you have podcasts on four different themes. So I can't even imagine the kind of knowledge you have absorbed over the years. But coming back to the topic, so we were talking
So
about podcasting. Yeah, you carry on. You were saying something.
it's less about the knowledge and more about different perspectives. It
Perspectives,
expands
right?
your mind to,
Yes.
so many different possibilities and enables you to see the same thing in different lights.
True.
And
So
that
true.
is when you are ready to even observe everyday situations differently. Seeing
True.
the same situation in different light allows you to analyze it separately and
Hmm.
know that these are the possible ways this, for example, conversation could go, and it would depend on what answer I do,
Hmm.
say, or which action I take. And after that, this will happen, and then this will happen.
Hmm.
Because I can see them in these different lights, because I've observed similar situations. So
Hmm.
it might seem that the person is driving a conversation, but what's happening is the person just knows that, okay, the probability of me saying this would result in this is high. So it's
Hmm.
just, working with the probabilities. And what's required for that is knowing the probabilities. And how do you know the probabilities is test and run, test and run, test and run.
Right.
When you have a big enough data set, you have reliable probabilities.
Hmm. And
So
then
keep
that
exploring.
brings me to the question. So what is your view on the current podcasting market per se in India? Because I guess podcasting had evolved in India post COVID. Because before COVID, no one knows what is even podcasting, right? The term podcasting, starts coming up in conversations, I guess, during COVID or after COVID. It really picked up. So what do you think, first of all, is the reason why podcasting kind of picked up in COVID and after COVID? And what is the current scenario?
So podcasting is not something new.
Hmm.
Podcasting as a vertical is actually older than YouTube.
True.
What happened during COVID is people were not having a lot of things to do. They wanted to
Hmm.
do something. Some people took up Instagram, started doing TikTok. Some people started doing other form of content creation because they have nothing to do. They want to do
Hmm.
something. And there were a lot of audio formats out there, so they started doing podcasts. Now, COVID was a very conducive time for people to let
Hmm.
their creativity out, let their conversations out. And that's why podcasting as a vertical experienced a considerable boom in terms of creators.
Hmm.
Now that's the keyword, creators, not
Right.
listeners. So now, with in an environment where the number of listeners maybe grew by 2x, the number of creators grew by 7x or so.
Hmm.
That means competition among podcasters rose exponentially.
Hmm.
Okay, putting that into a different perspective now. This competition rose among podcasters if they are competing over download numbers.
Hmm.
For me, podcasting has download numbers are not a goal at all for me. I have a very different goal when I do podcasts. And that is why I am totally unaffected by the download numbers I get. And I can actually tell you that the only time I check my download numbers is when someone asks me that, okay, what's the download number? I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, let me check." I don't care about it at all because my goals do not depend on the download numbers. It depends on other factors that are almost, not entirely, but almost independent of download numbers.
Hmm.
They do play some role, but it's independent. And what happens because of that? Now, this is the crazy thing, because my goals are independent of my download numbers, I achieve my goals. I'm more enthusiastic. My content quality keeps high, stays high,
Hmm.
and as a result, my download numbers shoot up themselves.
Hmm. So I have a follow-up
Whenever I,
question on this.
yeah,
How do you measure then? So if you're not tracking the viewers, number of views, the number of downloads, how do you measure the success of your podcast?
for me, the success of my podcast is the number of people,
Hmm.
the quality of people, and the quality of conversations I have on the podcast.
Hmm. I guess the same metric is what I applies. If I'm talking to you and I really like the conversation, that's for me as is a very successful podcast. I don't give a damn how many people are gonna see to it, how many downloads are gonna be on it. But if I like the conversations and if the person like conversing with me and I get a good feedback after the conversation that hey, that was a really good podcast, and I really glad you asked me those questions because those questions were never asked to me before in any sort of conversation. So that is a success for me, right? A
Yep.
day well spent, a time well spent.
Let me go a bit deeper into this. It's the compounding effect. Every time I get a guest, have a deep conversation into the topic of his interest, and
Hmm.
we have conversations that engage them, that give out value for audience, and that gives me a new perspective, and sometimes solve the challenges they might be facing because I'm bringing in my perspective as well,
Hmm.
or give them a different line of thought. So what happens is that person appreciates me, I appreciate him, that person refers me to two more people that he admire as well. The audience loves it because they got two different perspectives in that episode and they got a lot of knowledge bombs. So audience loves it. Now I got two more potential guests without needing to work for it. I reached out to those people, I have conversation with them, they guide me towards someone one step ahead,
Hmm.
and it keeps compounding and I get some really wonderful people,
Hmm.
and it's amazing.
And that's so true in my case also. So if someone like the way I'm conversing with them, they refer my name to someone else, or they at least give me leads that hey, let's you can talk to this guy. They give me a number or a reference that hey, talk to this person. I believe you would be having a lot of fun recording a conversation with him or her. So the same way happens with me, right? And that's so true, and that's something which it more excites me than numbers, that hey, I'm able to first of all build a relationship with a person for lifetime, right, for the long run. I know a new person, I'm learning about his or her life experiences, and also I'm learning and soaking information and knowledge which is equivalent to a lot of books which I'm supposed to read on that subject. If I'm talking to you on podcasting, trust me, it's equivalent to 10, 15 books on podcasting, right? Because you have done so many episodes, you have done podcasts in so many themes, and that knowledge I'm getting in an hour discussion, which I might have to spend so many hours and days by observing that information in the books, in the form of books. So that's so true, man.
Yes.
I want to ask you a question. Sorry, you are
There
saying
are two
something.
more, there are two more reasons for it. There are two more reasons for it why a conversation with someone who has done things more
Hmm.
valuable than reading books. It's
Hmm.
because a book is for general group of people. It's
Hmm.
not specific to your needs.
Hmm.
Second, when you read 10, 15 books, you get very different perspectives and you get a lot more information on topics you want and on topics you might not be interested in or relevant to. Having a conversation, it's a very focused conversation on things that are relevant to your specific needs.
Hmm.
A- As per the very recent scenario, current scenario, and future scenario, books would talk about the scenario as per its time. If you are reading a book from 2010, it'll share as per the perspective of 2010. If you read a book from 2020 or 21, it'll share perspective from 2019 or 2020, a year ago, because it takes time. for the entire
Hmm.
process, and how much specifically the podcasting world, the investing world, the marketing world, everything actually changed since COVID. So no amount of book can match practical experience at this time, at least.
True.
It'll take at least 5 to 7 years till we get there, assuming nothing like this happens again, which is again, I won't say a rare possibility. Anything can happen right now. We are in amidst three bank crashes, fourth one almost. You might have heard about Deutsche Bank.
Right.
So anything can happen right now.
Hmm. So true, man. Uh, I want to ask you last two questions before I ask you a last closing question.
Mhm.
First of all,
Sure.
what are the few tips you would like to give to someone who really wants to start podcasting, or at least has an idea of podcasting but don't know the approach to it? How to do the setup, what kind of guests to call on. So, what will be your tips for that person to get started into the world of podcasting?
Atishay, the answer I would give might offend people.
Hmm.
Think of podcast as startup.
Hmm.
If you are doing it because you want to do a podcast, like same, you're doing a startup because you want to do a startup, or you're doing it for listeners, for example, doing a startup for money, it's probably not going to happen.
True.
If you instead want to have a conversation or want to bring people's problems in front of experts and get a solution for them, that is one way. Podcast is a medium to get that done, and
Hmm.
that is one way to build a successful podcast. Find a problem that you want to address, find people who can help you find solution to that problem, have conversations with them. That's how I approach every podcast. Of course, I'm
Hmm.
not the only one. There are so many different podcasters that even I look up to, who approach podcasts a lot differently than I do. I, however, always think of podcasts as a startup which is targeted on a goal, on a problem that I aim to address with every conversation.
That's so true and so meaningful. To summarize, you are saying instead of looking startup as another way of generating revenue or a side hustle, look at it as a problem statement that you're picking a theme and you're trying to figure out or trying to get answers from experts, right? The way you're doing on your different podcasts, different themes of podcasts. When you are doing a podcast on relationship, you are bringing experts who are talking about on the subject. When you are doing your SaaS backstage podcast, you're bringing experts from that field who are breaking it down for the people who are into that field or about to enter the field.
Yes. So in all things relationship, I first invited people, particular
Hmm.
people, and understood what problems they are actually facing.
Hmm.
So, as part of engineering or MBA curriculum, both
Hmm.
research methodology was a prominent subject. And the first step is to confirm whether your hypothesis is valid or not. So I first
Hmm.
went on, had conversations with people to understand what is the problem they are actually facing. What I'm thinking, is it a problem? That's first part. Second, is it a prominent problem?
Hmm.
Second part, is this something people want solution to? Third part. And fourth, is this something that people strongly want a solution to and will pay for?
Hmm.
So
Wow.
getting these answers was necessary. And this kind of data is also why it was acquired, because this was very targeted and it was very scientifically approached. This is something you would do in your marketing PhD if need be. It's part of that. Not entirely, otherwise I would have been called Dr. Nishant instead of Nishant.
Hmm. True, man. So
So
true. That's hell of an episode, man. I learned a lot of things from you. Online and offline, we were talking about different things. And trust me, you are gonna be a all-timer on the Curiosity Robot podcast. I'm gonna call you again for another amazing discussion on maybe another topics, because you have plethora of knowledge and information from all the podcasts you have done so far. But before I end this episode, there's one last thing I want to ask you, or rather a question I want to pose to you, and I want your reaction or response to it. So imagine you're standing on the largest stadium ever built in the history of mankind, and you're only given a minute to share the biggest lesson you've ever learned. So, what would be that lesson or message to the audience?
Do I get some extra time to think on it?
Take all the time, man.
Okay. The very first lesson is learn to sell, but
Hmm.
don't sell your soul.
Yes. Wow. So deep and so impactful.
The second one is people will think and judge everything. At least you would think that, but people don't.
Hmm. That is so true, man. That is so true, because our entire lives we spent, obsessing about how others will react to us, how our others will react to the way we are dressed up, the way we are talking. That's so true, man. And half the problems will just go away if we stop thinking about that, and if we're just enjoy being ourselves. So deep and so impactful, man. So deep.
Third is sometimes we might spend more time thinking about it than it would take to go out and do it.
Hmm.
So evaluate, and maybe you can just do it in time it will take you to decide to do it.
Hmm. So
And
true.
fourth one is find a group of people you resonate with. That's more important than finding a skill set match. A mindset match, energy match is a lot more important than skill set match. Skills can be developed if you are with the right set of people.
Hmm. Amazing. Amazing. With this note, I guess we have to end the discussion. Thanks a lot, man, for all your knowledge and information today. I believe there are a lot of key takeaways for the listeners from this podcast. And guys, if you like the podcast, please make sure to subscribe. So, guys, that was all about today's discussion with Nishant. So, guys, that was my discussion with Nishant. We talked about his journey from starting his first podcast in college as a side hustle to now, you know, having four successful podcasts, and becoming a serial podcaster, and also working a full-time job. So I hope a lot from this podcast, especially if you are someone who aspires to be a podcaster or likes watching podcasts. There's a lot of grounds we covered. We also touch upon different themes and topics. I hope you like this conversation. And if you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe to my Spotify, YouTube channel for more amazing conversations like this. This is Atisha Jain signing off. Take care.